Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg. This is Monday morning, May 13th. This is my official kickoff of the second week of Horror Mayhem. And this is horror based on movies, whether it is a novelization or a story that was made into a movie or just a story about making movies. It can be any one of those. And I have actually started. I have actually finished 2 books already for this week. And the first one I finished on Saturday, which is technically week 1, but I finished the digital book version of Jaws by Peter Benchley, originally published around 1974, somewhere around there. Now, is Jaws a horror novel? Maybe not. Maybe it is. It is about a killer animal, a shark. So I think it can qualify as a horror novel. And I read it before when I was really too young to read it. So I remembered most of the details. But I also watched the movie version because I wanted to compare the two. So I'm going to make that an entire video in and of itself. But as for a novel, I kind of liked it. You know, it was very much a novel written in the 70s, but that's not a bad thing. I also finished the Amityville Horror by Jay Anson, and this was an audiobook. And this is theoretically nonfiction. I'm not sure if the author even believed what he was writing, because the plausibility of this is somewhere, I think, around 0. Sorry, I'm down at the end of the cul-de-sac, and the sun is really, really bright down here. So you'll just have to put up with this for a second or two. There we go. So, as I said, I don't even know if the author believed it. He said in the afterword that it was all based on true facts and there was corroborating evidence for all the strange things that happened in this house. I think that's total bunk. I think he's making that up. That's just a personal opinion. I was not there. I did not write the book. But a person of any sort of a skeptical mind is not going to believe this book. Now, it was wildly successful. As a story, it was sort of entertaining. The only problem is that everything supernaturally possible that has ever been attributed to demons or spirits or ghosts is sort of thrown into this house. It's sort of like they just throw in everything except the kitchen sink, which is why I think it's nonfiction. I think the Lutzes, who owned the house, concocted a story. I think it's based on what financial issues they were having, and they probably could not really afford that house that they bought. And his business was not doing so well. They had some tax issues. Now, I'm kind of wondering why someone would talk about his bad tax issues in a book like this. But if recent history proves anything, there are people who will talk about their personal histories in books, doing things that they shouldn't have done. And they think they're looking smart doing that, but they're not. So that's a personal theory, that it's all just a scheme by the Lutzes, and they probably hired Jay Anson to help them write their story. It is mentioned in the end of the audiobook that the Lutzes are on the copyright. So they are definitely making money when they first published this, and supposedly, I guess, they're still alive. I have not checked the internet to see that. It's still possible, I guess. But they made money from this, so I think this was all just a story that they concocted to get some money out of this house investment that they probably should not have done. And one of the things about this is that I actually think framing this story as nonfiction really was rather brilliant. It is a rather tepid, ordinary, not entirely original ghost and house story. So when they framed this as nonfiction, I think that was just a great marketing gimmick that they came up with, because I think this book would have died if it had been written entirely as a novel. And that is just, again, a personal opinion. I don't think the story was strong enough to justify its continued popularity. But as an audiobook, as a novel, you know, it was well worth my time listening to it. I'm not at all unhappy that I did. Did I mention that I read this book in high school? I'm sure I did. I even saw the movie way back when. Unlike Jaws, I don't think I'm going to watch the movie version of this again. It's just not worth my time. But it's currently free on Audible. If you are an Audible member, you can access this audiobook. And if you like it, go ahead and do it. I'm not sorry I did. Candyman, 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 Candyman. Okay, Candyman, I said your name 5 times. What are you? Just a fictional character? Candyman? The Forbidden by Clive Barker, published in 1986 in this collection in The Flesh. In other parts of the world, this collection might be known as Book 4 or maybe Book 5 in the Books of Blood series. It was eventually made into the movie Candyman. In this story, there is a woman named Helen. She is married to a rather stuffy British professor, but Helen is out doing research for her own project into graffiti. She's studying it, and she's gone into this down and out neighborhood in London to photograph the graffiti. She's looking at the abandoned buildings, and she's taking her pictures where this woman asks her what she's doing. And this woman has a very young child with a lollipop. This child is rubbing the lollipop into all sorts of unsavory places, such as the ground, in his ears, and then trying to stick it back into his mouth. And the young British mother is not pleased with her child. But she's talking to Helen about how horrible it is to have graffiti and how the punks are breaking into the homes and putting graffiti on the inside of the homes. Now, Helen is, of course, fascinated with this idea, and she wants to see what sort of graffiti she can find inside these homes. But the British mother also tells her these stories of strange murders going on, that people have been murdered, and it was done by a man with a hook for a hand. Well, Helen finds one of these old homes that has the door open. So she walks in and the place is trashed, of course. But there's this great graffiti of this huge face in one of the bedrooms. And she's thinking, wow, this is really fascinating. But then she goes to talking about her husband, about these murders. And no one seems to understand about these murders and believe in these murders. And Helen is beginning to understand, are these people just telling me stories, or were these real murders? So she goes back to this British mother, and eventually the mother denies her. She says, no, I was just telling you stories, and that there were no murders. Then Helen discovers that her child has been murdered, and while she was talking to her mother, the child was dead in her kitchen. And I'll leave it there because this story is really atmospheric. I got the feeling that I was in London, going through these broken down. I think the term Barker used was masonettes. So I really enjoyed this story. I'm trying to remember if I have ever watched the movie Candyman. I think I did. It is very famous for having the people say Candyman in front of the mirror 5 times, and the Candyman appears. That is not part of this short story, but I watched a trailer for Candyman on YouTube, and some of the scenes in this story do make it into that trailer, so there may be some connection. I doubt I'll watch the movie, but if you like a good atmospheric horror story, I'm almost thinking this can qualify as folk horror, although this is urban folk horror. I guess that counts. I really liked it. I was thinking about reading some short stories that had been made into movies, and somehow my mind turned to The Children of the Corn, a short story by Stephen King collected here in Night Shift. And I picked up my book and I read that story. And it starts off with an arguing husband and wife driving through the cornfields of Nebraska. This story was written in the 70s. I presume the time is about 1975, somewhere around there. And they're just having a bad old time arguing with each other. And it's just a typical, I guess it's more than just a typical husband and wife spat. Looks like they're headed towards divorce. And the wife says something that distracts the husband. He turns his eyes from the road and whack! He hits something. And he goes, "Oh, please, let that be a dog." It's not a dog. The wife gets out of the car. It's a little boy. He's carrying some sort of suitcase. And he sort of turns the body over to make sure it's dead, even though he knows it's dead. He notices that the throat has been slit. And that's why the boy was running away and ran in front of the car. So this man says, let's put this body in the car and go to the authorities. They drive into this town, and the town looks abandoned. Gas is only 35 cents a gallon. Even in 1975, that was dirt cheap. But he just wonders why there's no one in this town. And they remember hearing this preacher talking about it. He who walks in the corn or behind the corn rows. He says, that voice sounded really young, sounded like a teenage preacher. And they get all sorts of talking about teenagers and religion. And then things get really strange. I like this story. I remember reading this when I first picked up this collection in the early 80s. And I liked the story so much that I remembered that the Boogeyman, sometime or another, had been turned into a major motion picture by 20th Century Fox. And I thought, I'll just pick up the Boogeyman and read that short story too. And that's the story of a husband who wants to confess to a psychologist about why his 3 children are dead. It appears that all his 3 children have died under mysterious but natural circumstances. Of course, the man is convinced that those natural circumstances are not natural at all. They are done by the Boogeyman, who lives in the closets of little children. And I guess you can prevent the Boogeyman from getting out by making sure that your closet's closed. This is a great short story. I say it's a great short story, but it's never going to be one of his best. But I liked it a lot. So what happened after I read The Boogeyman? Well, I said, I'm 2 out of 2. Let's read The Lawnmower Man, which was made into a movie sometime in the 80s, I believe. as I remember the reviews saying the movie was about virtual reality, this short story has nothing to do with virtual reality. It is a story of a suburban man who hires a boy to mow his lawn over the summer because he likes a nice, clean cut lawn, but doesn't want to do it himself. And then at the end of summer, a neighbor's dog chases a neighbor's cat under the boy's lawnmower. Actually, it's his lawnmower. And of course, that makes a bloody mess. And afterwards, in the next year, this man is sort of hesitant to mow his lawn again because he'd sold his lawnmower that had run over the cat. Eventually, he hires a lawn mowing service that he picks up of an ad in the paper. And a very odd man comes to mow his lawn and does very odd things with this lawn. And again, this is one of those stories that is just immensely enjoyable. I can get a picture of this lawnmower man at the end of the story. I will not give you any spoilers to say what the lawnmower man does, but I got a very clear image in my mind. 3 out of 3. I went for Quitters, Inc., which apparently had been turned into a movie. I know I have not seen that movie, but this is another one of those stories that I read back in the 80s. And Quitters, Inc. may be one of Stephen King's best stories. Is it a horror story or is it a thriller story? It may be more towards the thriller end, but it definitely has some horror elements to it. And is a story of a man in New York City. He's apparently very wealthy, has a high-powered job, and he smokes like a chimney. And on one day, one of his buddies comes across, and he notices his buddy is no longer smoking cigarettes. And he says, "Try this." He hands him a business card called Quitters, Inc. It's an organization in New York City that will absolutely help you quit smoking. And he goes to this Quitters, Inc. It becomes very clear that Quitters, Inc. is run something like a mob would run a non-smoking program. Absolutely stunning short story. Thoroughly enjoyable all the way through. I remember the very last scene of this short story. Vivid as day from when I first read it in the 80s, and 4 out of 4 of this collection so far. I'm going to stop here on this collection. I'm sure there's another one in here that's been turned into a movie, but I got to move on to other reading projects. That's the end of Movie Week. I rather enjoyed this. My 2 novels and my short stories. They were a lot of fun. Next week is Classic Week. I think that is going to be a real winner. So, thank you for watching and keep on reading. Say goodbye, Pip.